Welcome to Improv Inside Out, the healing power of improv. I'm Diane Kettering, your improv host.
And I'm Katie Warzel, your mental health host.
And today we are here with educated, I hope you're educated, educator and author of two improv books, one being Play Your Way Sane, and the other, are you going to say what it is?
Okay.
I'm trying to remember.
Theatrical improvisation, consciousness, and cognition.
And also regular contributor to Psychology Today, correct?
Correct.
Welcome, Dr. Drinko.
Dr. Drinko.
Clay Drinko. We've been whispering your name when talking about you before you got on.
Like I'm like Beetlejuice or something.
Close.
Kind of.
Katie decided that your name sounded like should be in a superhero, or are you the villain?
Yes,
so
I'm
that's
the
our
villain.
question. You're the villain?
100%. 100%.
Okay. So that's why we've been whispering it. Like Dr. Drinko.
Yeah.
Yes. Dr. Drinko sounds pretty evil to me.
Yes.
That's what Diane thought. And I was like,
Yeah.
I just want to give him, I enjoy your work. And I was like, I want to give him the benefit of the doubt because I can also see you being a supportive figure for like Spider-Man.
Oh yeah, but like a sort of nymphish, fun, ornery sidekick type character.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think we're writing a screenplay right here.
Yes. Done. That's what we're gonna do for the next hour. Done.
So let's just improv it out. Sure. I told her that I just was watching an interview you had done. I think it was 2021. And I'm like, no, he's not evil because he's such a nice guy. And you said one of my favorite things in the whole wide world. And I hope the students that come to my workshops hear this. You also don't know the names of games.
Oh, never. No, I don't know the names of anything. No.
That was so freeing to hear.
I think part of the problem is that there's such like a lineage, right? There's such I don't know, these games change so much over time so that one person does it this way, calls it something else. And so it just ends up being like regional and everyone has different names and different takes on everything. So I say, who cares what it's called? Call it whatever you want.
Right.
That's not what to worry about.
One of the questions we asked you was your experience with the healing power of improv. And you talked about being socially awkward. And it seems like so many improvisers say that. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I think it's really fascinating that so many improvisers that I've come into contact with, amazing improvisers. Like I was never that good, but some of the best improvisers, on stage, they're like connected, they're in the moment, they are fearless. And then you talk to them and they're like, yeah, I'm just gonna go straight home. Like I'm nervous someone's gonna talk to me, right? Just really like anxious, uncomfortable. And I think one of the reasons is um, it's, I, I know I can speak for me, like to see that happening on stage, right? I was so drawn to it because in my better moments where I was less anxious and less in my head, like I would be able to say something funny, right? I would be able to have an interesting response. But in most of my moments, like I was not like that. I was like standing against a wall, like not knowing how to mingle and just terrified. So I think seeing that happening on stage and knowing that like a part of me could do it was
Right.
really attractive, right? Like I
Mhm.
knew that it would somehow like bring out my best self. So I think
Right.
that's why some people are drawn to it because they have this experience where they don't have to be themselves. They don't have to worry about all the things they worry about in their everyday
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
Right.
So I want a little bit of history from you, and I want to know what came first, the PhD or the improv?
Improv by a lot. Improv came way first. I think I started doing it in college. So I was like 17, 18, pretty young, didn't know what it was. But my friends were like, "Oh, you're funny, right? So you could do it." And I auditioned and I was super lucky that I got in. And so I did that for 4 years in college, and it was an incredible experience. Um, I mean, one of the reasons was that we were popular. That sounds awful,
Your improv
but
troupe was popular?
our improv troupe was so popular. Like we had
Wow.
sold out shows. Like it was like the thing to do. And also because
Wow.
we were very risque. We had like midnight shows. We really were like, you
So is
know,
this on campus then?
this was on campus. I hope I'm not
Okay.
getting anyone in trouble. I'm not going to name names. But
Okay.
we really like pushed the envelope for like what was allowed. And so of course college kids loved that, right? They loved
Right.
not knowing what we were going to do next, how we were going to top ourselves. And so I think being part of such a energetic, like exciting space was incredible. Like, and I really felt what it was like to have the audience in the palm of my hands. Um, and so that experience always had me wondering, like, what is it about improv? Like, I'm not feeling this feeling anywhere else.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so that stuck with me. And I didn't start grad school. I didn't start my PhD program until um, probably, 8 years after that. So it was a while of just being an actor in New York City, doing the Second City training when they still had a New York City school.
Okay.
So I did all that training, and I always was just thinking about what is it about improv? And so that question was still in my mind when it came time to decide what I was going to do my dissertation on.
And so what was your answer? What is it about improv?
What is it about improv? It is a type of flow where I think one of the main things about improv that sets it apart is that you can't fake the listening. So in a lot of even flow activities, like you're in the moment, right? But there's something about improv where if you don't listen, if you don't fully pay attention, you can't do it, right?
Right. Right.
Like if someone says, "Hey, Tony, have a seat," if I'm not paying attention, like I don't know that that's Tony. Like I miss all the
Right.
details and it just doesn't work. And so I think one of the main things about improv is that it's really like forced active listening.
Mhm.
And because you are forced to focus so much on the here and now, that helps your brain. Uh, it really makes it impossible to worry about the things that we normally worry about, or at least I normally worry about.
Yes.
I can't be paying attention in such an intense way about like, what's your name? Where is the furniture? Like all the space, all that stuff. I can't be focused on that and also be thinking, do they think I'm funny? Do I have something in my teeth? That didn't go over very well. All the negative things that I know I think all the time, and I don't think I'm alone. I just cannot do that when I'm improvising, just because of the very nature of the art form.
Yeah.
Right.
So do you practice mostly short form or long form?
I started with short form, and then I did, especially when I was researching my dissertation, I did the 6 week program at IO to really start to, I mean, I know 6 weeks is not enough to like really get it, but I wanted a little sampling of like what is long form. And I do have a chapter in the book about long form in the theatrical improvisation book. And yeah, so I've done both. I was part of Comedy Sports in New York City. So
Yeah.
like I have a special place in my heart for short form
Hmm.
because that's how I started. I like it because it's like kind of like instant gratification. Like it
Yeah.
either works or it doesn't, right? And we
Right.
know it, and then we can move on to the next game. So there's something about like the tempo of it and the excitement. And I've always been a not a smart improviser. How do I categorize myself? I've always been more physical and frenetic and um, just really
How
use my
fun.
body a lot. And
Yeah.
so I'm really drawn to short form because I can like get laughs just by like pretending I'm like a part of a car wash, right? And sometimes in long form, the more verbal improvisers are like rewarded for like really having that intellect. And I was never like an intellectual improviser.
Well, so then you're in college and you're doing improv
Mhm.
and studying. So where does it come about that you mix the two?
It was it was really in grad school. It wasn't until I went back to get my PhD that I just started writing about it. It really started with my dissertation. I didn't think they were going to accept my dissertation topic because I went to a really like theater history, like old school PhD program.
Mm.
And so the connection between cognitive science and psychology with improv was not very like straight up theater history.
Yeah.
And so I didn't think they were even going to let me do it. But I started presenting at conferences. I started writing all my grad school papers about it. I wrote a paper about how original practice Shakespeare was like improv in all these ways. Like we think of Shakespeare as like so formal and everything is like set and classic, but they had so many different scripts and they didn't have like their computers to like look up all these different lines like so
Yeah.
they really were going off of cues,
Mm.
so they a lot of times the actors didn't even have a full script. uh, they would just have some cue lines and then their lines, and so in a way it was a lot like improv because like
Right.
you kind of don't even know what the other person's saying. You're in the moment, you're reacting. The audience is wild, eating like turkey legs and whatever
Right.
nonsense back in
Right.
the day, right? And so then you hear your line, your cue, and then you just say your lines. And so I think, I really started connecting everything with improv, from Shakespeare to me being an anxious wreck.
So now you've done this, and then I read where you, take it into your parenting skills.
Yes, yes,
I
I became
would,
yeah, go ahead.
I would love if you're open to this. Uh, you talked about your daughter
Mhm.
having what you called a freak out.
Yeah, I mean, which one? Yes,
Oh,
go on.
yeah.
We
Well,
both have daughters.
daughters.
Yeah, I have two now. So, oh yes.
So, would you like walk us through how you use improv during something like this?
I think one of the my favorite um, applications with like improv into parenting was not necessarily like I love to do games and stuff with them. I think that's great. But one of the issues I was having was trying to figure out as a parent, it's really tough to know when to say yes and when to say no, right?
Right.
We are tasked with keeping these small humans, these irrational humans alive, right? So we
Right.
have to say no sometimes, right, for
Mhm.
them to live. Um, but I was really curious about like, why was I saying no? Was I only saying no in these life or death situations?
Mhm.
And so I really, recommend highly because I think it really helped me for people to just do like an inventory to just keep track of when are you saying yes and when are you saying no. Focus on the when are you saying no, like throughout a week, and really think about like why did I say no? So for
Okay.
me, I did that for a week and I ended up saying no because I wanted to avoid like some sort of an escalation, right?
Okay. Hmm.
Or because I wanted to avoid a mess in my house.
Okay.
Mm. Okay.
So
Okay.
those were the two things for me that I noticed. I really saw a pattern of like I say no because I don't want there to be marker on my really nice table, right?
Right.
Or because if I say yes to this, I see a couple steps in the future and I think you're going to freak out or something like that.
Mhm.
So my takeaway was uh, being a human is extremely messy and complicated. We cannot stop people from escalating, from
Right.
struggling.
Right.
from making messes, especially tiny people, right? That's like what they're built to do. And so I'm not saying I always say yes, because I certainly don't. Like, I think no is really important with parenting, but I try to be much more mindful now after doing that inventory of why am I saying no? Like, is it a
Right.
really good reason? And part of my takeaway is not necessarily saying no or yes, but letting scenes play out.
Okay.
Mhm.
That's really hard sometimes as a parent because I think that I know what's going to happen.
Right.
But part of it is just going like, I'm going to let it happen. Like, I'm just going to let you, you're safe. We're not going to have to go to the hospital.
Right.
Everything's fine. I'm going to let this play out. It might mean you're going to get really frustrated, but oftentimes, even through the frustration, my daughters figure it out, right?
Right.
Like, I hear some screaming, I hear some banging upstairs. And then when I go up there, like a little bit later, they're playing again, right? They have to figure out their own relationship. And so I
Right.
think that
Right.
was one of my big takeaways is like, let scenes play out and also just do that inventory. Figure out why are you saying no?
Mhm. Right. Oh, I like that. Yeah, mine are grown and already, I've ruined them already. So,
Yeah, yeah. I'm still in the process of ruining mine. Thank you.
no, I can't say that because, all my kids do improv with me. So I think that's like one of the super cool things about my
Yeah,
life.
that's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
That is very cool.
Do you want to take some questions? She's just geeking out that you're here because BJ, so BJ Lang, I think, was the one that hooked us up.
Yes,
And
yes.
when he texts me, he's like, "This one's for Katie because she's gonna geek out."
I love it.
Not that I haven't enjoyed talking to you, Dr. Drinko.
Bwahaha.
So I do have a couple of questions. I wish I had more. I didn't have 2 weeks wasn't enough for me to get through both books. So I apologize. I'm not as prepared as I would have had 500 questions if we if I had more time. But and I'm sure some of these answers came later on in the books, but I'm about I think halfway through the Play Your Way Sane. And I
Yes, yes.
really, yeah, I'm really enjoying it.
Thank
The
you.
games are super fun. It's a quick, easy read. I love how
Yes.
you justify everything. You spend a brief time justifying and then just give us some games to play, which is fantastic. And they're games that I can implement with my clients in one-on-one sessions.
Yes, yes. Great. I love that.
Yeah, I'm really appreciating that. Um, The other thing is I'm wondering, sorry.
I don't know what you're gonna say. I'm just holding on.
The other thing is I guess I'm wondering if, and I know the answer, but I'm wondering if you could, since you've got some distance from your book, from your writing now, can you explain to us in regular words before I was telling Diane that when you write the introduction to a book like this, and I don't know if you come across this in your reading or not, but like the introductions, like you can read it and understand it, but it's all such high level. The introduction is so way up here that it's like I always tell myself, okay, you can do this, you can get through it because I'm like, I know I'm smart enough. I know I'm smart enough to read this part, but then after you get through that, then it's easier to read, right?
Yes,
The
yes,
after. And so
yes.
I've gotten through your introduction and I understood it, but doggone it, my brain was hurting at the end. And so I'm wondering if you can, for our viewers, can you just talk to us about the therapeutic benefit of improv? What was the most profound thing that you found or saw in your research?
Yeah, so some of the benefits have been shown after I did the book, right? So the book
Right.
came
Okay.
out over 10 years ago now, and there was not a lot of research being done on the
No,
impacts of improv, right?
you're right. There's not.
So
I've
I
looked.
really sort of cobbled together, it was more
Mhm.
like a theory. And that's
Right.
this idea of like it being an enhanced flow state. There was a little bit of cognitive science that existed of like one part of your brain getting like reduced activity, another one increased activity, which really for me is a metaphor that improv helps quiet our sort of inner critic, which allows us to then have space to be more creative and present, right?
Absolutely.
So
Oh, I
we
love that
can
you said that. Yeah.
we can
Right.
say the cognitive science like names of all the brain regions and stuff, but I don't know that it's that helpful. I think for me,
That's
it's
right.
a like there's more of this, which means less of this.
And I love that
But
as well
yeah,
because, and I think you're going to address this, but um, I feel like when you speak that way, all of us can understand it. Number one, which I really, really
good,
appreciate.
good.
And it's more, we're more able to use the information. Like if because we have a better understanding in this language, then we can better use the information. And I love that you addressed what was suppressed in the brain as well as what's activated.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's what the cognitive science is
Hmm.
starting to show. There have
Right.
not been
Right.
studies since then. So, like,
Hmm.
we don't have confirmation, like it would take
Yeah.
many, 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 many studies
Right.
to really, really show this. But
Hmm.
it makes sense to me as an improviser that just what we were talking about earlier. I'm so focused, I'm so listening, I don't have to worry about all those critical thoughts,
Right.
right? And so they
Right.
started to see this in brain scans
Hmm.
of freestyle rappers, improvisers, and jazz musicians. So
Hmm.
all three different types of improv. And that's a bit of a trend so far. But since then, there's much more research on more like psychology. So one of the most um, consistent findings, of course, is that improv helps promote creativity.
Right.
That's not shocking, right? It's like
Hmm.
creativity practice.
Right.
I also think like the yes and principle, like some of the just those like foundational principles of improv help us to be more creative. Like it's a structure that just allows it, whether you feel like you're a creative person or not. Like if
Hmm.
I have a meeting and I teach people about what is yes and, right now we're brainstorming. That means we're not saying no to anything. And you set it up like that, like improv, you're going to come up with way more creative, interesting ideas, right? So
Right.
that's not shocking.
Hmm.
But they've also found that improv lowers, especially social anxiety. So it
Hmm.
decreases social anxiety and it increases, actually, it decreases uncertainty intolerance.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
we are better with not knowing what's going to happen next.
Yes. Yes.
So to me, that's why improv and social anxiety are such good, yin and yang. I think that may be
Yes.
why people with anxiety are drawn to it because it
Hmm.
seems to really be able to address that. It seems to be a type of exposure therapy where in my real life, if I'm nervous about mingling with someone at a party, I get rewarded for not doing it, right?
Yeah.
Like
For not doing it?
for
Hmm.
not doing it, right?
Okay.
Because I stand against the wall. They didn't call me dumb. They didn't roll their eyes. They didn't,
Right.
right? Like it's fine. And so I'm going to keep doing that. But improv is sort of like this forced exposure therapy where you are out there with other people being extremely social, extremely like no safety net. You're just making stuff up with other people. And you get rewarded for doing the opposite of what you usually do, right? It feels good
Right.
because you say something and they don't call you a dum dum. They go along with your idea, right?
Right.
And it
Right.
feels really good.
Right.
That is the best I've ever heard it explained.
Isn't that
Thank
Seriously,
fantastic?
I
you.
love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because you said we do better not knowing. I've never would have thought that because I would have thought someone's social anxiety wants to know the end game.
Yeah, I mean, you pre-script it, right? So for me, I
Right.
know for me, social anxiety, if I don't go to the party, if I don't put myself out there, I know how it's going to end, right? I'm
Right.
gonna
Right.
be fine, right? Because I didn't put
Hmm.
myself out there. Um, and that to me is really similar to how no works in improv. Keith Johnstone writes in Impro that no keeps us safe. right? Like if
Okay.
somebody in a scene with me
Right.
calls me like a serial killer, my gut reaction as a human is like, no, like I'm not a serial killer. I don't want to, that feels
Yeah.
yucky to me. I don't want to see how this plays out, right? So
Hmm.
if I say no to this idea, I'm safe. I'm not a serial killer. The scene doesn't go anywhere because I shut it down, but I'm safe. I don't have to see how this might play out. But if I say yes to it and I practice that skill of saying yes, I actually find out that it's really fun
Hmm.
to be the serial killer on an improv stage, to be
Right.
clear.
Right, right,
Uh,
Right.
it's really fun because it's not me, right? I'm just saying yes to stuff. I'm going along with ideas.
Right.
And it's really liberating when you start to realize that nothing can end a scene, right? Like if somebody kills me, I can come back as a ghost, right? It's just that
Right.
sort of improv creativity is so exciting.
Hmm.
Once you start to really learn it and get it, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
oh my goodness, that's yes. Yes, and
Very cool.
Yeah.
so do you get to do you do improv now for fun?
I don't do improv anymore. I'm a middle school teacher, so like my whole existence is kind of being an improviser in a way.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
I definitely teach an improv course every year here at the middle school. Um, but I really am more interested in improv like in my everyday life. Like me as a teacher being
Right,
so in the moment with them that if
right,
somebody like asks a question that's a little left field, I'm not this like brand new teacher who's like, no, my script says that we must learn, these are the
Right.
learning outcomes, right? I can be
Right.
like, that is wild. Like, let's
Yeah.
talk about it because I now have enough teaching experience where I know that they're not going to derail my scene. Like I
Right.
can integrate what they're
Yeah.
doing, and I know that we're still gonna get to the last beats of the long form.
Right.
yeah.
And in my parenting as well, like I'm much more, and it's probably because I have a 4 and an 8-year-old now, so it's
Mhm.
that's just my world. So I'm parenting,
Right.
I'm teaching, um, and I don't know, there's something that just shifted over the years where like I'm not as drawn to like being on an improv stage.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I will say though, I do love it when I teach my improv class here, and I definitely participate. You know, like I'm not one of
Yeah.
those like just side coaching teachers.
Uh-huh.
Like there is a part of me that's like, I'll jump in and do freeze, you know, the freeze game with everybody.
Right.
So there
Right.
is a part of me that still, I have such a good time with it still.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
So I am so your students are so fortunate. I just, as we've
Thank you.
spoken with people, this has come up in our in past podcasts. I wish that every school, every middle school had an improv, like had improv as part of their curriculum. Or honestly, we spoke with someone who teaches kindergartners improv, and so think about what a gift it is for those kids to learn how to yes and each other and work to encourage and promote each other in that way at such a young age, and to have that gift as they go all the way through high school together, you know, to just this.
Absolutely.
And I was going to ask you about that, the sociology of the improv stage and the improv group, if you have any insights on, and maybe you've seen this in your classroom even, on how that promotes um self-esteem maybe, and helps the kids move through just that part of life.
Yeah, interestingly, a lot of the research, a lot of the studies on improv show that it is the like reserved, quieter wallflower type people who benefit more from improv. And I
I'm sure.
think everything I've ever seen with improv, like
Hmm.
this checks out to me. Um, I've seen it time and time again because those students are speaking up and maybe they
Right.
normally wouldn't, and they're getting rewarded, right? Of like kids
Absolutely.
are laughing at them, they're hearing their voice is mixing with other voices. So they're really getting like highly rewarded for that. And it's changing the class dynamic
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely.
That's not
Yes.
just whoever who never talks in the back. Right? That's like a part of the class now, that person is. Um, and I think it also makes sense why nothing against stand-up comics, right? I love some stand-up comedy. But there's like this stand-up comic type person. I think we all know this person from improv classes, right? There's
Right.
usually
And from middle
one,
school classrooms.
and from middle school. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so that type of energy is not listening energy. That's
Yes.
like me talking, 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 me not listening. So it makes sense that that sort of extroverted type would not get the same benefits from improv
Mhm.
because they have to break that pattern somehow, whether their teacher
Mhm.
helps them to break that pattern, but they have to get more into a place of listening so
Mhm.
that they can then be able to like experience some of the benefits of improv.
Right. So along those lines, um, do you feel like that's bringing them into a space where they can listen is keeping them from benefiting? Or do you feel like they already have what it is that improv offers? Am I asking that question well?
I think you're asking it great. I think um improv has other things to teach them, right? They
Okay, I
don't
agree. Yes, I
need
agree. Yeah,
to like make the bold
that would be my
choices. Like
guess.
they are already making the bold choices. They're doing so they probably need help with
The
listening,
listening,
sharing
right?
the air, turn taking. That's why I love it's almost like calisthenics, the yes and calisthenics, where
Yes.
you do the like, uh, I'm going shopping. Yes, you're going shopping. And I'm going with you. Yes, you're going, right? That whole pattern
Right.
that when I was younger was so boring, right? I was like, don't make me do it. Oh, it's so boring. But it really is shifting your brain and forcing you to listen. I cannot do that exercise if I didn't listen to you because I have to repeat what you said.
Hmm.
And I think that's really important, especially for, well, really all people, but definitely middle schoolers. Like they
Right.
just might not be in the habit of really listening to what people
Hmm.
say. And what a life skill. Like so many conflicts can be avoided by just making sure you actually heard what the person said.
Hmm.
Can you tell the
Right.
difference in their grades after they go through an improv session or their
I've
behavior in class,
I've
actually in class?
I think of it more as like behaviors. Yeah, I probably because we're a private school. We
Hmm.
don't really do
Okay.
grades, right? So I don't really think in those terms, but I do notice like a boost in confidence,
Yeah.
oftentimes like cohesion of the group. Certainly with the shyer students, like being a little more confident. Um, yeah, I definitely noticed some things like that. I think the other important point is it's not just about collaborating with each other. I really emphasize yes and as like a tool that an individual can use.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
I do a lot of like teaching and my own writing is all about yes and, right?
Hmm.
So a lot of students want to write like IDK, like I don't know, or like just not write anything. And so I really do a lot of work on like you can write anything.
Hmm.
And then you just look at what you wrote and just yes and it, and you just write another thing. And
Yes.
once you discover that like
Yeah.
that's as easy as it is, writing can become a lot more fun.
Hmm.
Uh, Thinking can be a lot more fun. So I really use yes and as a tool for just like an individual and not only like group cohesion.
Hmm.
Yeah. I so can't wait to listen to our interview again because I've so I
We're
can come back
learning
and
so
make
many things.
notes. It's like I don't want to make notes right now, but uh, so do you have another book coming out? What's next?
I, well, I don't, maybe let's make it happen right now. I have written another
Besides our
book.
superhero movie.
Yes, I have written another book. And I'm sort of like shopping it around.
Yeah.
Okay.
Haven't heard anything yet. So yeah, another book exists and it is about improv. It's for young people and it is
Okay.
improv writing. So it's
Oh,
different lessons, so that kids can like face the blank page and
oh
surprise
wow.
and delight themselves,
Right.
and
So
really
who's young? What age is young? Who are you
like the kids
targeting?
that I teach. I would say like teenagers,
Okay.
like maybe
Okay.
Mhm.
12 to 17, maybe.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love that. And I have a request as well. So for you to write next.
All right, I'll do it.
All your free time. Um I I really think I think this is the third time I've said this on a podcast, at least, but I really feel like educators need to understand how to bring the sociology of improv into their classroom. Not necessarily with, I mean, gaming is wonderful tools, but like help them understand what the attitude is and what the benefits are. Because I so feel like and maybe it's just because like I've always been the nerd, like 100%. I've always felt comfortable at school because I can do it. I understood the rules and I could follow those rules to the, in an excellent way.
Yes.
We are opposites.
But I know I'm a nerd. So in any other setting, I have to work hard at it. Um, but then I also have seen all of our kids kind of fall apart in middle school and then have to pull themselves back together. And especially what stood out to me is an ordinary, I'm not really going to say names or anything, but because I don't want this to be,
This
I
is
don't,
a
I don't want to be like
podcast of no
negative,
names.
right? I don't want to be
Yes.
negative, but this is kind of negative. So, but my daughter especially is quite pretty articulate, and she, like some of my friends' kids, loved certain teachers, and this particular child of mine had trouble with a few teachers. And so these same teachers, and my student came home and was like, yeah, no, blah, blah, you know, their kids like him because their kids can speak out. And, there's this kind of, pardon my language, this like smart ass attitude where if you can dish it out and go back and forth, then you're good and you're cool in the classroom. But if that's not you, then you don't really have a place, right? There's not a place for real questions and answers. It's just smart ass comments back and forth between teacher and student.
Yeah.
And um, it just so happens that the three teachers that my student had trouble with were all fired within 2 years of my student being there. So I
Mm,
know that my child was seeing something that wasn't okay,
yeah.
but it was
Or they got them fired.
well, I didn't say anything. My kids did not want me involved and we got through with decent grades. So I just,
Yeah.
but they certainly weren't contributing to my kids' level of being comforted and feeling accepted within the classroom or among their peers, which is what the teacher's job is. And
Yeah.
so I think that every teacher just doesn't get it. And so I'm wondering if there's a tool
Yeah.
to offer. Please, Dr. Drinko.
I'll write it. I'll write it. I'm very interested in this. I was just talking to somebody else who's sort of a teacher trainer, facilitator of teachers.
Mhm.
And, his specialty is on math and he does all these math trainings, but his clients are really like, we want to know about sort of like improv, like being in the moment, being,
Right.
a little more loose and a little more present and really hearing what the kids say. And so I think that would be so important. It's similar to me. It reminds me of some of the work with like medical improv, right? Like when people go to medical school, they're not usually getting a lot of improv training or like
Right.
bedside manner training.
Yep.
Um, but that's one of the most important things, right? If you're
Absolutely.
not in the moment with your patient, you're missing really important things. Like you're messing up a
Yes.
scene with like potentially catastrophic results, right? And
Right.
so teacher training to me is similar, right? Like I didn't learn anything about
Mhm.
like just how I am. Actually, a lot of the teacher training is like these scripts where it was so strange to me, where they were like, write down the question you're going to ask. And then in your lesson plan, you're going to write possible responses that the students might say. And then you're going to write what your responses to those responses. I was like, No, like I will do this because I want to get my teaching certification.
Right,
But like I knew from the beginning that's not teaching, right?
right,
Like
right.
I cannot be in the moment with you if I'm like, hold on. You said C, like it's just, and I think
Right.
teachers get so bogged down with that they're not in the moment with the kids. And so
Mm,
I'm a big planner. I'm an over planner. I do like pacing and unit plans and I do a lesson plan every day. And then I let all of it go, right? I write down on the board, like it's right here. I write down like what's our first little prompt
mhm,
and then what are we going to do today? A little bit of an outline.
mhm,
And then I'm like sitting on the chair in the back, sipping on my cup. I try to be so relaxed
mm,
so that
mhm.
I can like be in the scene with them.
Right,
And I can't do that if I'm worried about like, oh, we have to hit this and this. And if they don't learn this today, then tomorrow
right.
we can't do any of that. And it's amazing what like improv moments happen that I could never have planned for.
Mm,
And
right.
it happens, I think, because this is how I operate now. It happens almost every day where
Okay.
I'm like, I can't believe you said that. That's fascinating. I never would have thought of that. Maybe tomorrow I can shift a little and we can I can really be in the moment with them.
Mhm,
And that's academically, but that's also like socially and emotionally.
mm,
Like
mhm.
if
Right.
I'm really worried about all
Absolutely.
the like checking this, I can't be like, whoa, like you look furious. Like what is happening, right? I can't
Right,
have
Yeah.
right.
those moments with the kids. Or sometimes it's like, hey, let's walk into the hallway.
Mhm,
Like what's I think that's like you can't, especially middle schoolers, especially kids,
mm.
like they're they're figuring everything out. Like the reason I love this age is because like they're hot messes and like I'm a hot mess and it's fun to just like
Right.
try to figure it out together in a really
Yeah,
open and honest way. And so yeah, I
Right.
would love to work on something like that. So
Oh
you've
my
put the
goodness.
idea in. Don't be surprised if in a
yay,
couple
good,
of
good.
So
years.
Let
start
us
the
know.
crusade for Katie.
Let us know. So here's my follow-up question, because I know that there are a lot of teachers who are like, yeah, that sounds ideal, but so what can administration or even like higher level, what kind of support do you feel like allows that in the classroom?
I think focusing leaving space in those meeting times and in
Mhm,
professional develop times to talk about like the moments when you are just with the kids.
okay.
So there's a lot of time spent on curriculum development or assessments or the rare times when we're talking about like just being with the kids, it's usually like classroom management,
Mm,
right? And so if we have our classroom management time, but we focus much more on like rapport building,
mhm,
how to like yes and with our students, how to be more present, how to be more in the moment. And I think
mhm,
the other thing is in one of the papers, one of the academic papers I wrote, I tried to create like categories
mhm,
that teachers and administrators could look at that are improv based so that we would have something to like talk about and then work toward improving. So if you really
mhm,
look at like non-judgment, listening, and this
mm,
idea of like yes anding, then you can start to have conversations like, you may not have known this, teacher, but when this student said that, you made a little frown.
yeah,
Oh, yeah.
That sort of like nuance I've never seen talked about with teaching,
Right.
right?
yeah, yeah,
And so I think it could be a really powerful way for teachers to start being much more conscious about how they exist with
okay.
their students. And the other thing I want to say about it is another Keith Johnstone thing. One of my favorite things that he taught me was lowering your own status as a teacher, as an
Mm,
educator,
Oh.
because it helps your students like they have to bring their status up.
mm,
So when I took the Keith Johnstone class, he really played up being like sort of bumbling and old and couldn't see, like he
Mm.
needed help. And so what did we all do? And we were adults, right? We're like, I'll do it. Oh, let me do this scene. Here, let me and we all sort of lifted up our status
Hmm.
instead of being nervous and like, ooh, it's Keith Johnstone. He's the almighty improv guru, right? And so
Hmm.
I always think about that of like teachers, if nothing else, should lower their status. And
Mm.
that doesn't mean like accept abuse or, I
Right.
don't
Right.
mean that. But I don't stand up here. I mean, a lot of times my students don't know that I have a PhD.
Yeah.
I'm not like, I am a person who knows everything about this and that.
Yeah.
Like, I don't really volunteer any of that. Like,
Oh,
Hmm.
I'm
I'd be
just,
having every one of those kids calling me Dr. Drinko.
but yeah, I just think it's really powerful to like lower my status
Mhm.
consciously, right? And not always. Like there's some times where I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna, now I'm in charge. But to
Right.
be more conscious of like, I'm making a decision to sit in the back and drink my coffee and be like, oh, I don't know. Someone else, you know how the beginning of class goes. Somebody else lead today. Oh, well,
Right.
Yeah.
Clay's sitting in the back. Maybe he has I don't know what's going on with him, but
Right.
he doesn't seem like he's in charge. I'll help Clay. I'll get up here and
Hmm.
explain World War II, right? And so
Yeah.
I think there's something I wish more teachers had the space to think about like how they are with the students.
Mm. Well, you talked about that. You
Mhm.
talked about one of your students just did not like you,
Oh, yes. Well, more than one, I'm sure.
but
Um,
that how after a while you figured out why, I
Yeah, I
guess,
had a
right?
really frank discussion. It was really early in my teaching. I was teaching in the
Mhm.
Bronx. I didn't know, I hadn't gone through education training. I was not a good teacher, like, because I was teaching how I was taught as a kid, right? Which is like,
Mhm.
teacher says stuff, you write it down, we all go home.
Yeah.
So I didn't really know any better, but I was doing my best. My heart was in the right place. And this student just disruptive, wouldn't let me talk, really acting up. And one day we were working on something and I was circulating the room, seeing like, where are we at? Does anyone need help? And I just flat out was like, it doesn't seem like you like me. Like, what's going on? Like, I'm interpreting your behavior as like really rude.
Right.
Just like
Hmm.
what?
Right.
And she said, I think you're rude. And instead of saying, I'm a nice corn-fed Ohio boy, right?
Right.
I am not rude, right? Instead, I was like, oh, how so? Like, what do you
Mhm.
mean? And she explained it, and it made sense to me. She was seeing my behavior as like not being genuine, not being
Mm. Oh.
authentic. And I
Hmm.
think she was really perceptive. And it took, I think, a lot of, it's probably because of my improv background, right? I think I just defaulted to like, tell me more. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
okay, you could be
Yeah.
right. Tell me more. And that changed everything. She was
Mhm.
able to explain why she thought I was rude. I explained to her why I thought she was rude. From that day forward, she was my number one fan. So much
Yeah.
so that she would be like, in future years, when I was teaching ninth grade English, she'd be like, is anyone giving you a hard time? Like she was gonna like beat them up, and I'd be like, no, 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 we're good, we're good, we're good. But like it just took us like clearing the frame,
Right.
Right.
like being really honest. And I think that's a part of improv and applying improv that's so important that people don't really think about is that it's not just going along with things. Sometimes it is being so direct and cutting right to the heart of something,
Right.
and then
Hmm.
Yes.
being genuinely curious about
Right.
figuring out both people's perspectives.
Right. Right. And I think that's something that we just, the world, in the world, we don't do that enough. We aren't
Yeah.
curious enough about why something is happening, and we can't bring ourselves to the point we get offended so quickly
And
that we can't.
defensive,
Right.
yeah.
Right. And
It's scary. Like I don't
yeah.
want to hear why I'm rude,
Right.
right? I don't want to
Right.
hear that,
Right.
but it really takes a conscious effort
Right.
to
Right.
say, and I think about relationships, right? Like I think about marriages. It takes a conscious effort to go, okay. I
Right.
don't want to hear this,
Right.
but right, like tell me more. Tell me more. How, you know, like what is your story? How are you seeing this? And being really
Mhm.
open to them being correct. I think that's the
Right.
hard part.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
It's
All right,
uncomfortable.
Clay, I know you don't have a lot more, a lot of time to spend today. I hope we can do another interview because I could spend easily another hour with you.
I would
It
love
was
that.
weird calling you Clay.
This was great.
But
This was great.
for our listeners, where can they find your books?
Wherever books are sold. No, I think online, I know playyourwaysane.com is my website. And
Okay.
so people can go there, they can subscribe to my newsletter. I'm sort of moving away from social media. So I'm focused more on, I do a monthly email. I'm trying to have more of a community that way.
Okay.
Because social media was like, it wasn't, as my students as my students would say, it wasn't giving. And
Mhm.
so I'm moving away from that, but I'm on LinkedIn, playyourwaysane.com. They can find me. And then especially that newsletter is where I tell people about my latest Psychology Today article and
Okay.
And they can sign
anything.
up for that on playyourwaysane.com.
That's right.
Okay, great.
That's right.
Excellent.
Awesome. Well,
Excellent.
thank you so much for joining us on
Thank you.
Improv Inside Out, the healing power of improv. And until next time, stay happy and healthy. Inside out.
If you would like to be a guest on our show, please contact us at improvinsideout.com.